hello, Avanti. Hello, Oliver. Lovely. Thank you for joining me today and joining us and this union of our Conscious Together team. And I guess what I was really interested in exploring with you is, if you're happy to, our personal philosophies for helping ourselves and for helping others. So we're obviously united in our journey through mindfulness, and we've come from similar recent mindfulness backgrounds in terms of MBCT, MBSR, but we've all come to this obviously from our different positions in life and our different positions on the globe as well, different cultures and different countries. And so I suppose it would be really interesting for us to just share, if we're happy to, like I say, our personal philosophy for helping ourselves and helping our others, and helping others navigate the complex landscape of mental health and well-being, and see where we are in common and where we might have slightly different perspectives and what we can learn from that. Does that sound like a plan?
Yes. Absolutely. And Lauren, thank you so much for bringing us together. I think it's one thing to celebrate that we're all coming together to sort of spread the word of mindfulness. But I think being able to talk together about issues that we all care about so much means a lot. So thank you for hosting us.
Very welcome.
Yeah, so I mean, I'll probably start off with my philosophy and pass it on to Oliver. I think for me, growing up, it was always a lot of challenges, and moving cities within India has been not easy, to say the least. So having to move friends, move schools, meet different people in different situations has been a very learning experience for me, and one that has taught me that we are never helpless and choiceless in any situation, which means that if we want to make a change in our lives, the option is always given to us. We always have that option with us at all times. And I think as a coach, as a facilitator and mindfulness teacher, I believe that if we are responsible for our own peace in our relationships, I think we make our world a better place to be for people we live with. So that is also the mantra of Conscious Together, where we redefine our impact on the world around us. How do we want to come across to people around us? So this is what my initial thoughts are. Oliver, over to you.
Avanti, and thank you very much, Lauren, to getting us together. I think it's an interesting topic too. I think helping others, benefiting others is a topic can be looked at from various dimensions. Maybe, first of all, from the phases of life. I think starting from childhood, many cultures, if not all, educate that you should, it's not selfish, but protecting yourself is all okay. And we are born also innately with some kind of, there is a me. If I got hurt, then I have pain. So there is almost like an instinct to protect yourself. So thinking about others is almost like second priority. And of course, later in life, we experience different issues, and we try to search some answers and solutions. Some of the answers I've got was, first on the traditional wisdom side. So there is a altruism, like helping others is the right way. Right, I had that idea. In the meantime, being educated in today's, modern science, without those, I try to search if there's any evidence that shows this work from the science point of view, which I did find some great evidence. There are researchers on today, psychology, and all the scientists, psychologists put different groups together, measuring their level of happiness. Those that had compassion practice, or all these altruism, did show great more level of happiness. So that's approved. Again, after that, this mindful training, together with all those science knowledge, as well as the traditional wisdom to today, I think it's a good balance. So I guess in order to benefit yourself, you almost have to help others, benefit others. That's almost the only way. And in the meantime, it happened the same time. So others and self receive those benefits all the same time. So I think helping others or benefiting others is definitely it's not optional. It's almost like a must.
Definitely. Lovely. Thank you. Thanks, Oliver. Thanks, Avanti. So there's some really interesting stuff coming out there. And I suppose if I share a little bit about my sort of personal thoughts and feelings here on this, and then we can see how we overlap and intertwine, and where perhaps our paths diverge a little, and whether there's something that we can learn from each other in that, if there's something that we can delve into a bit more deeply. So I suppose for me, and I think this sort of resonates with what you were saying, Avanti, is very much around the ability. We do have the ability to change our life circumstances. And I think it's very easy for us to think that we are the way we are. And you hear people sort of make that claim left, right, and center. You like me the way I am, or tough, basically. And there's an element of strength in that, and I think there's an element of importance in our personal identity. There is, absolutely. However, we are also a social species, and we do need to work together. And absolutely, to Oliver's point, I think there's this sort of need for a communal altruism, this sort of community of kindness and sharing, and we are a social species. And we wouldn't have got very far if it was just the selfish gene. And I don't know if that's a Richard Dawkins who wrote about the selfish gene, or someone else. I might be trying to sound cleverer than I am. I need to do my research. But there's definitely a lot of stuff in the behavioral evolutionary psychology to support the benefit of working together, and actually putting others before yourself, even to the point of sacrificing the individual in some cases. So I think for me, mindfulness is a really powerful entry into exploring the self, because for me, and the work that I do with my clients primarily, and I know mindfulness is a large topic, but I find the thing that's probably the most key for myself and for most of the clients that I work with here in the UK is about building the discipline and the stability of attention to actually see what's going on, to actually observe the patterns of your behavior and the patterns of your mind. Because you've got wonderful tools, and this obviously links into MBCT, you've got cognitive behavioral therapy techniques based on stoicism and the such. But if you don't have the attention and the awareness to pull yourself out of the stickiness of your thoughts, it's very difficult to turn that attention constructively and ask yourself the question, is this thought true? Because you're completely lost in the thought. So for me, mindfulness is that absolute sort of first stepping stone to just going, oh, that's interesting. This behavior is happening like this. This thought is happening like this. This emotion is happening like this. But in itself, for me, mindfulness doesn't automatically give you an answer to that. And I think that's for me, and in my practice personally and professionally, I like to build these sort of layers on top of that. And that's very much around the human psychology, because it's one thing to notice what's going on, and then it's another thing to do something about it. And so that's why I really like the overlapping. So I think mindfulness is a critical foundation, and I think it's fantastic, and I think it's a great skill for everyone to practice. but I think you're really missing an opportunity if you, and I'm sure lots of mindful masters will cast me out into the streets for this, but I think you're missing an opportunity if you don't use that as a platform for something else, and that ultimately leads to helping other people as well as yourself, I suppose. So I'll pause for breath there.
Wow, wonderful. Avanti?
I'll let you speak, Oliver. You seem to have ideas. Go for it.
Well, I guess first of all, I think, Lorraine, I couldn't agree more that mindfulness can help us just finding out our just day-to-day thoughts or maybe actions, because we thought is insignificant. Looks like in life there are so many more significant things you need to accomplish, but coming back again, we'll talk about the current moment, like right now. I guess I want to start with the flight attendants example again. So the broadcast always tells us that once there is a lose of cabinet pressure, you need to put those oxygen mask first. Back to what I've said earlier, this is not selfish. This is not, I guess sometimes people get confused because life or anything that's not always that one-sided. So this self-compassion, mindfulness in one sense can help people, get enough oxygen so that you are healthy or powerful. You got the strength to help others. I think that's one function, one thing that definitely mindfulness can help. Also, to your point, Lorraine, for some practitioners of mindfulness, you may know there are those autopilot. There's so many thoughts going on just in one instant, right? For example, I feel mindfulness started with, like John Kabat-Zinn started with those that had the chronic pain. And chronic pain is not uncommon, actually. I guess especially when we grow older, it's almost like unavoidable to most people. Okay, but those pain, after that, most people don't know those pain can cause you to think more, like, why me? Why it didn't happen earlier? Why is it happening now? Can that be even worse? How can I get rid of it instantly? Right? Many thoughts, maybe 1,000 thoughts in a second, but without your notice, right? Even by knowing that, then you can separate what is an objective pain to the real suffering that you are suffering from, or anyone. So I guess in that sense already, that could help so much. You separate that. Of course, nobody becomes a Kung Fu master by simply realizing, hey, these are separate, right? They are not together. Pain is pain, suffering is suffering. You have to practice because it's been so strong. The habit has been so strong, you automatically go that pattern. However, the good news is to practice and separate, and it definitely help or won't hurt. First of all, to have the right view. You have to know that pain and suffering are separate. And then back to the flight attendant example, by practicing this, you can be that someone that put the mask first and you got enough oxygen, you're powerful. To someone next to you, you're helping them, right? And you're benefiting others. So I guess this is what you mentioned, that the mindfulness can help.
Absolutely. And to your point, Oliver, I think we get quite caught up in a challenging situation. For example, if I've lost my wallet today, I will keep suffering the thought that I've lost that wallet for, say, a whole week to come. And I think the difference between pain that occurs the first time, in this case, losing my wallet, has already happened once. But what we choose to do is we keep thinking about, oh, I really miss that wallet. Where did I lose it? How could I do it? This is the third time I have done it. What will my friends think? And so on and so forth. So I think we like to sort of marinate this one situation called losing our wallet with a lot of other thoughts, which therefore increase our suffering, increase the mindless thinking bit, which can be easily caught in the moment and seen through that feeling, that is through that emotion, rather than going up in our heads. And I think that is a tool I found very powerful within the mindfulness realm, where it is able to differentiate between the situation that has occurred and how I could worsen it by repeatedly thinking about that situation. So that is how I see mindfulness bringing quality of life for us.
Yeah. No, definitely, Avanti. And I think it's interesting because you're sort of, I say you, the mindfulness is kind of trying to fight against our evolutionary psychological tendencies, which is to think about or to remember our errors or our failures or the things that went wrong to try and protect us from doing it again. So it's always, and that's what I find really interesting about exploring the sort of the psychology side of things in conjunction with mindfulness, because you've got to sort of walk this sort of tightrope, I think, of the balance. And again, to Oliver's point, I think you've got to have the flight attendant, you've got to put your own mask on first, and self-care isn't selfish. However, I see instances of people who get lost in that stage of their development and are just chasing their own well-being to the exclusion of the giving benefit to others. And again, I think this is where, Oliver, you talked about the need for compassion, and I think altruism, and I think that's critical. And I think this is where a moral framework is absolutely paramount, because you can be mindful, technically, you can be mindful and let go of all your indiscretions and use it as an excuse to make more, or to not feel, and not that you should necessarily unduly suffer for yourself, but to not feel guilt or remorse for doing something genuinely a bit selfish, perhaps. And again, I think there are plenty of examples, even with enlightened masters, and I think Sam Harris talks about this quite a lot, the gurus who go on sort of rampages with their students and cause all sorts of mental harm to them, and under the guise of enlightenment and doing mindful practice. So I think that's it's really paramount that when we're teaching mindfulness and when we're helping people with mental health challenges in the world, it's about finding that ethical framework to underpin it for them. That's certainly something I do a lot of thinking about. Anyway, I don't necessarily have an answer for everything. It's complicated, of course. Ethics is inherently complicated, I suppose, and ethics depends on where you are to a point in the world and what your culture is and what the survival threats to you are. I think there's a lot of complicated factors that we like, particularly in the West, when we're in our comfortable ivory towers. We like to cast judgment on other people because we have all these things and it seems obvious and easy to us. But actually, ethics can be very different if you're really in a really bad place, perhaps. So,
yeah, I kind of do have some thoughts on that also. But I'm wondering if putting a concept of ethics could solve the issue totally. It reminded me one guy called Confucius. Confucius wouldn't found a university or a education system like today's, right? You put 100 people together in a classroom and try to teach them the same thing. Every individual is different. Their capacity, the ripe level of their wisdom is different. That's why even on mindfulness, that could be different level also. To your point, if the flight attendant example, it's someone that in his or her age or her level of ripeness is needed, I think they need to receive this kind of education first, and then maybe then grow to more of a benefiting others or more altruism. Because for some people, if you tell them, hey, you should benefit others 100%, they may just leave. From a mindfulness teacher point of view, I think it's better to keep them until they're more ready for the next level. I probably want to look at from that dimension also. But of course, I agree with you to putting some. It's not just a technique, definitely, because our mind, I think, has more, and then just like a machine, make it more clear, adjust its focus like a camera. I think definitely it's more than that.
And I agree with you completely, both Lauren and Oliver, in that I think talking about ethics is very important when it comes to the realm of mindfulness. Like you said, Lauren, I think it's currently mindfulness is practiced by different groups of people. And again, culture and where they are in their evolution matter. But I think as MBCT teachers, as mindfulness teachers, it's very clear from a practice level or a teaching level for us to, I'm gathering words here, but to have a consensus on whom we will train. And I think that is paramount to Conscious Together as a platform for mindfulness teachers, being that the ultimate intention of teaching and training is do no harm to the other person. And while today mindfulness is treading very thinly between a therapeutic intervention versus a psychological intervention, I think for us as practitioners, it is very important to lay and establish a foundation with our clients, with our participants, with our groups, to ensure that they don't have deeper psychological needs, which may not be met by a more generic mindfulness training like we would do. And I think establishing that trust with your client in the very few first interactions is very important. Ruling out any discrepancies or misunderstandings if people come from different cultures. I don't know how you see it, but I feel it's a very important first step to establishing trust in the relationship, to say, what are the needs that you come with? What is the history and the background you have? And how are you looking for mindfulness to help you in the current situation? I think that conversation is very important.
Yeah, and I'd agree, and I think but it's a difficult one to have sometimes, because it's not it can feel a difficult one to have, because you want to help people and you know that you can. And also there's a lot of competing sort of mindfulness approaches looking to offer, the simple solutions for people. But, you're absolutely right that appropriate screening really should take place. And what I find working with people in my own practice, again, and what mindfulness helps us discover, and sometimes this can be very uncomfortable, is often the challenges in our own lives and our own, repressed and suppressed emotions and past, and even trauma. I mean, when you start scratching the surface of trauma, it affects so many more people than you would assume if you're not working in the field. And as we know, mindfulness can absolutely, do wonderful things for the healing of trauma if it's handled skillfully and carefully and with patience and care. And I think that's the danger, isn't it? If you don't have that relationship with your clients, if you haven't built that relationship, if you haven't been diligent enough in your screening process, just trying to take them into the process gently, then it can be a very challenging experience for them, and it can uncover things that they are perhaps not ready to face, or even knew that were hidden. That's the other interesting thing, isn't it? Particularly again with trauma, it can be so repressed that people have no conscious recollection until they start perhaps doing some meditation practices and start feeling really strange and uncomfortable. So these there's definitely some some interesting things to try and navigate there. Not wanting to put the audience off, of course, because mindfulness is really fantastic, but you might just need to take it a little bit more gently than you might assume. And I suppose, again, this ties into it being a skill. And I think this ties into something, Oliver, I think you touched on earlier, and I just wanted to come back to that. But it's this practicing. You don't, I can't remember what example you used at the time, but you don't, I think Kung Fu, you said Kung Fu, and you don't read a book on Kung Fu and know how to do it. It doesn't matter how many books on Kung Fu you read. You don't get the skills if you don't practice. And it's, for me, this is one of the huge missing links with mental health generally, and mindfulness as well, is that it's a skill. And I think this is applicable to most avenues of mental health, right? Whether you're talking, CBT or NLP or counseling, right? You're changing the behavior of your mind. And that is a skill that requires just as much investment as if you were training to play football, right? You couldn't read a book on football, having never played it, and then go and rock up and play with any degree of skill or competence. So I appreciate I've merged some topics there, Avanti. We're talking about screening clients and the tightrope between therapy and sort of mental health, and then moving into the skill side of mindfulness. But again, I suppose that's the joy of mindfulness. It's difficult to describe concisely and to really drill down to one thing. It's very expansive.
I love the passion that comes out when we talk about mindfulness. So I'm only happy. I mean, if we're able to sort of convey that joy talking about it, I think for what my experience with clients has been with mindfulness is, I think even if they come with some prior experience with, learning mindfulness on a YouTube channel, for example, they do feel a lot more value in sitting down with a teacher or in a group, just given the fact that when there is a reaction to a meditation, say there's probably a reaction like, I don't know, maybe a stiffer back, or you have more irritation, or you don't feel very well in your body. And I think having somebody who can guide you through these reactions is something that is really important. So while online resources can be really, really effective and helpful, I think getting deeper into the practice of mindfulness has shown to gradually decrease trauma stored in the body. And there's a lot of work done by Dr. Treleaven, and there is a lot we can go into talking further on this. But I think we have to come with an intention to learn mindfulness as a skill for life, rather than a tool that we can try for a couple of days and then, trashed in the bin. So it wouldn't work if it's for a very short time. It'll give you some results, but I think really a longer duration practice is what is going to really help you address or make life changes or increase your quality of life. So I don't know if that is a good response to your question or your comment, Lauren, but
no, absolutely. I love it. And I think, one of the analogies I use in terms of your point about it's got to be a skill for life is I don't see it as any different from cleaning your teeth, right? In that sense. So you don't stop cleaning your teeth and think that your teeth will stay healthy and shiny. And you don't stop exercising and think that you'll keep your level of fitness. But again, in mental health and in all, I think in virtually all of the practices of mental health that I've encountered, and I certainly obviously haven't encountered all of them, but people think that they can do something for a day or a week or even a month and then they're fixed and then they can stop. And that really doesn't work for mindfulness, and it really doesn't work for any of the behaviors that you have in your mind. I think, unless you get a there are things that can obviously hard rewire your brain, and that's typically trauma, and that's typically negative. But if you can sort of flip that into a positive, then you can hit that switch, and you can change a behavior. But that's unlikely, I suppose, in a sense, right? In terms of most people's day-to-day experience with themselves and their willingness to change, they don't have that hammer to the head that suddenly makes them stop smoking, right? That it's something that they've got to work on constantly. And yeah, so mindfulness, cleaning your teeth, doing your exercise, anything that you want to change in terms of your relationships with other people. I mean, this is the crazy thing, isn't it? You can go to marriage counseling. You do a couple of sessions with a marriage counselor, for example. I haven't fortunately had to do this with my wife yet, but people do. They go for 2 sessions and they go, wow, I've really learned something, and then they stop. Mm-hmm. And what happens invariably is they go back to their old patterns. It might take a week, it might take a month, it might take a year, but if you don't keep investing in the changes you want to make, you go back to what's easiest, and that's your default responses. So anyway, sorry, that's a very long-winded response, Avanti, but
wow. So I guess I can't help mentioning smoking. It took me about 7 years to completely quit. My first quit lasted 2 years, which was not bad until an old smoke friend came to me, to another country actually. And and then you can see back and forth. The good news is the trend is, it's getting, you smoke less until, and then it lasts much longer time. My last cigarette actually helped me to realize it was really not the, any biological, it's really the mind. It was some kind of anxiety, or deep in my mind, I was looking for something. And cigarette by then was kind of like a temporary remedy. I found out I kind of needed some kind of friendship. I cannot make someone not happy by rejecting the offering of a cigarette until my last one, but it took 7 years. That resonate what you said, Laureen. Mindfulness may sound simple, but it's not easy. You can't just again read and have one session and then jump to the old habit. That's very true. So it needed practice, needed diligence. However, on the other hand, I also like to you see, it's the mind. Once that moment, for example, when we were in that session of marriage counseling, what we're thinking about? We actually were thinking about, hey, let's fix this quickly. Let's do the thing that I like. Unfortunately, all those things that I'm in favor, again, is nothing more than bad habits. So I guess back to mindfulness, if we realize what we were thinking, right? What we were thinking, even at that moment, we know we were trying to just get rid of this thing in front of me and get into some other bad habit. If our mind was clear enough, our awareness was there to that moment, I think that could help also. I guess, again, that's how I think that's why and how mindfulness can come into play.
I was saying to Oliver's point, I think the motivation for us to change our habits need to be really, really big. And this is a source that unfortunately I cannot name at this point. But the paper talked about how motivation increases when your negative consequences also increases. So the more you can see your habit creating difficulties or challenges for you, the better motivated you are to change it. So I think it is all of us psychologically as human beings, like you mentioned, Lauren, we feel more secure keeping our habits the same. remaining the same, not making any changes, because change is scary. But at the same time, when we realize that the consequences of of us not changing are so high that the only way out is to change, and it takes us humans a while, but I think we're all similar in that sense. So I wouldn't say that we're not trying to make a change or it's not our intention, but I think the urge is not strong enough to actually break that habit. So, yeah.
And I suppose that's where mindfulness can help as well, because we can recognize those tendencies and our struggles and be more compassionate with them, and help understand our why we might want to change and apply that. I think that's a whole new topic that we can focus on perhaps for our next conversation, because change is a big one, and mindfulness and supporting change. So I don't know if you guys would be happy to do that if we because otherwise I think we could probably talk all evening about mindfulness. But I'm conscious that we have other things that we need to do with the rest of our time as well. So I mean, does anyone have any sort of final thoughts or final tips or best idea that they'd say for starting your mindfulness journey, perhaps to help wrap this up?
Yeah, maybe I'll go first. I think one of the John Kabat-Zinn's summary on the 7 attitudes of mindfulness, it's always been my favorite. Workshops or talking to people, even be able to talk. One of them, like acceptance. There are actual examples, like some lady, very smart business woman, but she's got depression. She was able to listening something, broadcast, some forums for discussion. That one key word, like acceptance, all of a sudden hit her. So, hey, I'm depressed, and so what, right? Let me accept the fact that I am depressed. That one single word, acceptance, did help her get out of the depression. I think if somebody wants to look at mindfulness, go take a look at John Kabat-Zinn's 7 attitudes of mindfulness. I think it should be very helpful.
Thanks, Oliver. That's really good. Thank you. Vanti.
And I think my tip, would be to just being able to carve out at least 20 minutes a day to simply just sit down with yourself without an agenda, but to look at what's showing up in our minds this morning or this evening, whenever we decide to sit up. Because I think once you start viewing what's showing up in your mind, you're able to do a lot of magical things with it. So just sit down every day for 20 minutes, and that should be a great start.
Brilliant. Love it. Thank you, Avanti. And I suppose my final thought then will be just begin again. And this is, again, another really core principle for mindfulness. And I remind people that although they can't remember it, not many people can remember this, but when you were learning to walk, you were rubbish. But you fell over a lot. You were no good at it, but you didn't stop, and you picked yourself up, and you figured it out, and you then learned to run and to jump and all these other things. And that's true as well for your mindfulness journey. You will fall over. You will, it won't necessarily feel easy to start with. Begin again, and you'll get there. It's worth the investment.
That is fantastic. And I think before we end, if this gets enough views and we get more people, you know where to find us. You'll find our contact down in the link, or we'll put a bit of information up for you.
Let's do that. That sounds like a splendid plan. Yes, we'll have the links in the bio for the Conscious Together website, and for our individual bios on the social media channels, should you want to connect with us. And hopefully, if you've got any questions that have come up through this conversation that you'd like us to try and answer next time or reflect on next time, please do drop them below as well. It's always good to have that input and hear what you guys think about what you have heard today. Thanks for being part of it. Thank you, Oliver. Thank you, Avanti. Really appreciate your time. And I really look forward to doing this again.
Absolutely. Thank you, Oliver. Thank you, Lauren. It was a lovely experience. Thank you for having us.
Take care, guys. Thank you.